All right, we're going to roll into a new topic and a new concept that we haven't talked about before in this class, which is genetics. So I like doing genetics. I think it's fun. It's like kind of like a math problem in a way, but not nearly the amount of calculation that a typical math problem would have. So it's kind of like a puzzle, I guess you would like to think about it. Um, this is a really cool unit because you get to start to see like how the DNA from mom and the DNA from dad can make different combinations for every single kind of characteristic that's on a person, like eye color, hair color, how many fingers you have, just everything is determined through DNA. So the genetics is the study of that. It's the study of how the DNA from two people combine to make a new cell, which then turns into trillions of cells, which turns into us. And so genetics is that way of figuring it out. So we're going to learn a whole bunch of words, which is why you have a concept map this week. This video is designed to go over those basic terms to hopefully get all that stuff clear for you. And then there's a second video after this one, which is like how to actually solve full genetics problems. Okay, so this one's going to be more of a basic information on genetics. So hopefully you're watching this one before you've watched any of the other videos that we've gone over. All right, let's go into the online notebook just so you can see where we're looking at. Okay, so we're in week 5. Oh my goodness, it's coming to an end pretty quick. Genetics is going to be the last thing we're going to be going over before we finish off the class. We're going to do basic genetics this week. Then we're going to roll into sex-linked and codominance type traits next week. And then the week after that will be pedigree charts, which I believe will be an extra credit assignment for the last week of school instead of a final exam. Okay, so things you need to do this week. We're going over all this in the week 5 agenda. We're looking at assignment number 1 right here. You should have clicked on this right there, which is this video. And then that second video is going to be here. And this video is the same as the one that's way down here. After you make the concept map, it says Charlton's review of basic genetics problems. That video is going to go over these types of problems, but I'm going to actually go over 2 problem sets for you. We have 5 problems here. I'm going to go over 2 of them. And so that video that's down here going over 2 of them is the same video as the second one up here. Ooh, a lot of information this week, this one here. So what are we going to go over? All this stuff you see here, background information, DNA, I'm going to go over this stuff as I would if we were doing a lecture in class. What is dominant? What is recessive? Homozygous dominant, heterozygous, homozygous recessive. So basically everything that's written in words here is to help remind you. I'm going to go over it in a little bit different fashion right now. And then, like I said, you got to learn how to do genetics problems, which this goes over, gives you the list of steps, and then gives you an example problem right here. Okay, so let's jump back to our camera. What are we going to need for this? We're only going to need pen and paper as we jump into focus would be nice. Come on, camera. There we go. Zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to go over genetics the way I would for you in class. So let's talk about basic genetics. All right, little reminder from Unit 7, because we're kind of continuing where Unit 7 left off and what we did last week with DNA mutations and meiosis. So remember, DNA is where all the information starts. It codes for an mRNA or messenger RNA, which then goes outside of the nucleus to the cytoplasm and makes a protein. Okay, the process by which DNA is turned into mRNA, when the DNA is read and creates an RNA. Remember that? Remember that? It's transcription. And the process where the RNA is read to make a protein is translation. Hopefully that is a review for you. You're at least getting a, oh yeah, okay, kind of moment. All right, so the DNA sequence, and you have a lot of them because you have a lot of DNA. Okay, that DNA sequence, that A's, G's, C's, and T's, okay, string a whole bunch of them in a row. We call that a gene. And what does it do? It makes a protein. DNA makes a protein. Hopefully you've got that concept down now. And that protein has a certain function. Okay, and when I say the protein has a certain function, sorry, let's go a little bit more here. Okay, what am I meaning by that? I'm meaning that that protein is going to go do something. Okay, that protein is going to, you know, make your muscles move, make your brain work, make your enzymes that digest your food. It's going to do something. Well, when you're developing, when your body is first starting, proteins are the ones that are guiding how to make your body. How many little fingers and toes are you going to have? How is the brain going to develop? How is the hair going to be made on top of your head? How is the hair going to be made when you go through puberty? How is all that stuff get determined? Is through the creation of proteins. So it does. So when we talk about how somebody looks, like the shape of their nose, or are their earlobes attached, or the shape of their lips, or their eye color, all that stuff is made by proteins. And so your DNA is already set right before you were even a baby. When you were a single cell, your DNA was set that you will one day have this eye color. You will one day have these earlobes. Some things happen sooner when you're inside your mother, and so you come out with this stuff already. Like eye color doesn't start until usually 2 or 3 years old. And so your eyes come out one color, but they change to their permanent color around age 2 or 3. So all this stuff changes as your life goes on, and it's the DNA making the protein that makes all these things on people look the way they did. Okay? All right, so what is genetics? Okay, genetics is the study of, seems really fuzzy for some reason. Let's try that, a little grainy. All right, genetics is what? It's the study of how genes go through generations of families, obviously, people who are related to one another, and just in general, society. So I like to use eye color. You know, you might have the blue-eyed gene in your family, and you know, one person gets blue eyes, and then all of a sudden, like everybody else in the family has brown eyes for a long period of time, and then like 2 generations later, there's a grandchild born, and all of a sudden blue eyes come back. And you're like, where did that come from? Because when you look at their parents, both their parents were brown eyes. Okay, so we're studying like how did that happen, and where did it come from, and how's the DNA getting moved from one set of parents to the children, and then from those children to their children, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we are concerned with means what do we care about? We are concerned with how genes show up on people. In other words, the characteristics. Like if you look at your brother and sister, you might notice you guys have the same kind of shaped nose, but you have different eyebrows, or you have different shaped eyes, but you have different lips. Okay. Sometimes brothers and sisters have a lot in common. You can see things on their face that almost look like the same person. Sometimes brothers and sisters don't look anything like each other. Why is that? Well, it has to do with what DNA your family passed on to you. All right. So we need to start at a certain point. Let's start at our DNA spot. Okay, so in the last couple of units, you've been seeing me write DNA with like, you know, A, T, C, A, A. I'm just going to throw out a sequence of base pairs, part of nucleotides that make the DNA on one side. T, A, G, G, A. And you could go on for thousands if you want. Okay, that is long. That is also tedious. You made that into RNA, you made that into protein, but I'm going to save you that trouble now that we understand that, and we understand that this will make an RNA, which will make a protein. we're going to represent the DNA in a much simpler way. So instead of writing all of this, we are going to write just a letter. And usually the letter is your choice. So instead of me writing all that, I might just say H. I might use a capital H, or I might use a lowercase h. We will get to when to use capital, when to use lowercase. But when you see letters in genetics, like capital B and lowercase b, I want you to remember these letters represent sequences of DNA being passed from mom to dad. Or sorry, from mom and dad down to their children. Okay? So when you see letters, you need to know that they represent DNA sequences that create or lead to the creation of proteins. So the letter H is not going to cause you to have blue eyes or to have brown hair. Okay, it's a DNA sequence that makes a protein that's going to have brown hair. But you know what? We're just going to put H just to make things simple, and so it's easy for us to move things around. That's the reason we're going to use just letters. Okay, so that make sure that when you see letters, you think of sequences. All right, let's talk about some words. The word traits. What is a trait? Okay, a trait is a characteristic on a person. And it doesn't have to be people. This happens in all animals and plants as well. Characteristic of an individual caused by a protein. Okay. So you might say like, okay, like, yeah, like the shape of your earlobes, or you know, the eye color or your hair color. Those are all traits. How smart you are, not necessarily a trait. It could be related to how your brain was connected. That could come from your DNA, or it could be how you grew up. So that's not necessarily a trait. Your personality could be connected to how your DNA creates the brain, but could also be just related to how you grew up. So, you know, not everything is controlled by DNA. You know, emotions, not necessarily controlled by DNA. Okay, there are connections. So let me give you some examples of traits. So like the shape of eyebrows. Okay, that's a trait. Or how many fingers you have. Aha, you probably didn't know that. You're like, wait, everybody's got 5 fingers, right? Nope. There are 6-fingered people in the world. Another trait, type of earlobes. Notice I'm not giving you the options. I'm just saying the category is the shape. The category is the number. The category is the type. Okay, that's very important because the next word that comes in here is the word allele. And what is an allele? An allele is one possibility for a trait because one DNA sequence, or again, a gene, was passed from a parent to make a certain protein. Okay. So the trait is the category, the allele is the possibility. So let me give you some examples. This might actually help by doing some examples here. I'm gonna zoom out just a little bit. Maybe that'll make it a little less grainy. Okay, so let's put 2 categories here. On this side, I'm going to put trait. On this side, I'm going to put the alleles for that trait. Okay, so if I talk about the shape of eyebrows, that's the trait. If I talk about what are the possibilities for the shape of eyebrows, Well, there's bushy eyebrows or there's thin eyebrows. Okay, now there probably may be more possibilities, but let's just keep it very basic at this point. Okay, so you can have bushy eyebrows or you can have thin eyebrows. So the trait is the shape, which is a category. Each of the options is the allele. All right, let's do it again. Number of fingers and toes, but we'll keep it at fingers. Okay, so that's the trait. What are the possibilities? You can have 5-fingered people or 6-fingered people. There was actually a pitcher in the major leagues who used to have 6 fingers. And some people used to guess, like, well, does that give him an advantage because he can grip the baseball a lot better than a 5-fingered person? Is that an unfair advantage, or is that just nature giving him something that not everybody else has? Is it cheating? Ooh, that's a philosophical question, isn't it? Is it cheating that he has 6 fingers? All right, last one. Type of earlobes. Okay, again, the number of fingers is the trait, but the different options are the alleles. The type of earlobes are the trait. What are the different options? You can have attached earlobes, or you can have hanging earlobes. And so right now, you're probably reaching up to your ear and asking, which one do I have? So a hanging earlobe, attached earlobe, so if this is your head, the attached earlobe kind of comes down and just kind of attaches like that. That's your ear right there. All right, a hanging earlobe kind of comes down and has a little bit of hanging, and then it kind of comes back up. So that's hanging, that's attached, that's hanging. So touch your ear right now and see, which one do I have? Do I have attached or hanging? And we can actually trace it back to your parents and say, who's the one who gave you that? Next time you look at your mom and dad, you might want to, like, wait, who gave me the ears that look like this? Was it my mom or was it my dad? Okay. And so each allele, each of these, each allele has a letter. And that letter can be a capital letter or a lowercase letter. Okay. And so you might be asking, well, first of all, what letter? Because there's a lot of letters. And then how do I know which one's going to be capital, which one's going to be lowercase? Okay, so examples usually are the best way to go. So example would be shape of the eyebrows. Let's go with that right there. Let's go with that trait. Okay. And I'm going to pick a letter. And a lot of times we can pick letters for anything we want. We could do E for eyebrows. We could do S for shape, although S is usually not a good letter. And I'll show you why in a second. Let's go with E for eyebrows. All right. So I got a capital E and a lowercase e. And so I know for eyebrows, they can either be bushy or thin. So how do I know which one's the capital? How do I know which one is the lowercase? Okay, the capital letter, that one right there, is for the dominant allele. And the lowercase letter is for what we call the recessive allele. And so you might be asking, what is dominant, what is capital? Okay, so I'm going to go through the example and that'll explain what dominant and recessive are. So in this example, bushy eyebrows are dominant and thin eyebrows are recessive. And so what does that mean? Okay, so it means that the bushy eyebrow allele will happen even if it's next to the thin eyebrow allele, because you get 2 alleles from your parents, right? You get one from mom and one from dad. So if I were to get one letter or piece of DNA from mom, so say capital E, and I were to get another piece of DNA from dad, and it's a capital E, then obviously they're both the same. They're both going to be capital E's. They're both going to be, I'm going to have bushy eyebrows. Okay. If I get a capital E from mom and a lowercase e from dad, So I got DNA from mom that says make bushy eyebrows, but I got DNA from dad that says make thin eyebrows. Which one wins? What would I actually have on the person or me? Well, the DNA for bushy dominates over the thin eyebrow. So even if you have the thin eyebrow DNA, it's almost like this just turns this off and you'll end up with bushy eyebrows. So this person has bushy eyebrows. This person has bushy eyebrows. So then you say, okay, well, how do you get thin eyebrows then? The only way you can get thin eyebrows is if your mom gives you the DNA for thin eyebrows and your dad gives you the DNA for thin eyebrows and you have two lowercase letters. In that case, you would have thin eyebrows. So when you have one of each, this one dominates. When they're exactly the same, it'll be that. When it's exactly the same, it'll be that. Okay, the only reason the dominant and recessive come into play is when you have one of each kind. And the one that's capital letter will dominate over the one that's not a capital. Okay, and so this helps us remember that bushy eyebrows dominates over thin eyebrows. So if you are looking to get married and have a child, bushy eyebrows is going to win over thin. So if you don't want your child to have thin eyebrows, or sorry, if you don't want your child to have bushy eyebrows, then you might want to find somebody that has thin eyebrows. Gives them a better chance. Not saying it's going to happen, just saying you got a better chance. We'll get into chances in a little bit. Okay. So, and then we should just make a note here. Dominant means that if you have one of each, whatever the dominant one is, the dominant allele will show up on the person even if the other one is recessive. For instance, blue eyes is recessive. The reason you don't see a whole lot of blue-eyed people is because in order to have blue eyes, you have to have little b, little b. Okay, brown eyes is dominant. So if you have a capital B with a little b, that capital B dominates over that one, and you get brown eyes. But that blue-eyed DNA is still in you. It's still there. So if this person and this person had a baby, this person could give the little b, and this person could give the little b, and then they have a child that has blue eyes. And so this is how a brown-eyed person can have a blue-eyed child. I'll even throw one even more crazy for you. Let's say you got a brown-eyed mom that's capital B but lowercase b, and you got a brown-eyed dad who's got a capital B and lowercase b. So both mom and dad have brown eyes. And everybody in their family has brown eyes. And you go, wait, brown eyes, so my child's going to have brown eyes, of course. But if mom gives the little b to their kid and dad gives the little b to the kid will have blue eyes. And that is how it like freaks people out. Like, whoa, where'd that come from? So that must mean that those little b's or that DNA is traveling through your family. It just happens to be that the big B has been dominating over the little b for some time. So yes, it is possible that could happen. Happens all the time. Okay, so that's dominant and recessive. So let's get into these letter combinations that we're kind of talking about right here. Okay, we call these letter combinations genotypes. Okay, anytime you see the word genotypes, just think letters. Okay, that's all I need you to think about. When I say, what's the genotype of mom? What are the letters? What's the genotype of dad? Letters. What are the possible genotypes of their children? The letters. Okay, and so let's go with the three possibilities. So let's go back to bushy eyebrows. So we had a capital E and a lowercase e. And then we had a capital E and another capital E. I'm just listing what are the three possibilities. Or the child could have a lowercase e and another lowercase e. Okay? So you can either have both capitals, both lowercase, or one capital, one lowercase. All right? So what happens in these, first of all, what do we call these? Okay, so these are different from each other. So we call these heterozygous. Key being hetero. You remember the prefix hetero, hetero means different. Heterosexual is somebody who has sex with a different person. So a male and a female was a heterosexual. The opposite of hetero is homo. And we call these homozygous. Why? Because they're both the same. Homozygous. Homozygous. Okay. So if I say heterozygous, that's obvious. There's only one combination where you have differences. It has to be one capital and one lowercase. But if I say, oh, mom is homozygous for whatever trait we're talking about, you don't know, do I mean both capitals or both lowercase? So we have to add in another word on these two. I have to say, oh, mom is homozygous dominant or mom is homozygous recessive. So you see homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive. And so that tells me they're the same and they're both lowercase. They're the same and they're both capitals. Okay, that's important to know. Okay, so this is obvious, right? This person with two capital E's, we're going back to bushy eyebrows. Two capital E's, you're going to have bushy eyebrows. Okay, this person has two lowercase e's, so this person's going to have thin eyebrows. Okay. This person has one of each. What will they have? Well, like we said, the capital dominates over the lowercase. So in this case, this dominates over that, almost like that isn't even there. Even though it is there, it acts like it's not there. So the capital wins. So this person will have bushy eyebrows. Okay? These things, these characteristics that are created from the letters are called the phenotypes. Pheno with a PH, okay? So when I say what are the genotypes, I want the letters. If I say what are the phenotypes, I want to know what they would actually look like on the person, okay? So the genotypes make the phenotypes. You need to know the DNA before you can know what the person's going to look like. If I tell you that they have bushy eyebrows, well, this person has bushy eyebrows and this person has bushy eyebrows. So then it could be that they have one capital and one lowercase, or they have capital and capital. If I say, oh, they just have bushy eyebrows, and you don't know the letters. So you're kind of in a guessing game at that point. Whereas if I say, oh, they have thin eyebrows, well, that's obvious. There's only one combination that gives you thin eyebrows. That's lowercase, lowercase. So that's the situation we have here. Now, one other thing I want to note here is this guy, the heterozygous person. So they have the capital, and the capital dominates over the lowercase, but they're still carrying that lowercase around. They still have the ability to give that to their child, even though it's not showing up on their body at all. So we call these people carriers. And when we talk about disease, carriers for diseases are people who have the DNA for that disease, even though they may not be showing it. So they may have the DNA for that disease, but because they have a capital letter that dominates over it, they don't have the disease itself. They just have the DNA inside of them. And so they could give a disease to their child, even though they themselves don't have a disease. Okay, so this is carriers. And carrier means, what does it mean? It means you carry the gene even though it doesn't show up. So if you take something like sickle cell anemia, which is the blood vessels being in a different shape, you could be a carrier for that disease, even though you don't have that problem because you got a capital letter. But if the mom gives the lowercase letter and dad gives a lowercase letter, the child will have the disease. So you could be a carrier for it. So if you ever see the word, oh, mom is a carrier, what does that mean? It tells you right off the bat, it's heterozygous. That's the only way to be a carrier is you're heterozygous. You have one capital, one lowercase. Okay. If I say, oh, mom is homozygous, again, you have to know, is it homozygous dominant or is it homozygous recessive? Because they're both homozygous. Okay. And then if I say phenotypes, what do they look like? If I say genotypes, I just want to know the letters. Okay. Like I said, that's why we're doing a concept map. You can see how these words, there's a lot of new words, not difficult, but just a lot of new words. All right. Speaking of new words and new phrases, let's talk about generations. Because we talked, genetics is about family. Okay, you're going to see different generations. We need to keep the parents separate from the kids, separate from the grandkids, and so on. So how do we do that? We're going to, let's just do a little picture here. Let's do, it's easy. I stole this from Mr. Manro. He draws his women with these funky afros. It actually makes it easier to draw it, so that's good. Okay. So the woman I always draw with the funky afro. Sorry, women. I know you don't have funky afros, but it just makes it easier for drawing. All right, grandma, grandpa. Okay, grandma and grandpa got together and they had, let's say, mom with funky afro. Okay, mom got together with a person, dad. That means cross, means they had a child together. They got together and they had you. And since I don't know if I'm talking to a boy or a girl, I'm just going to leave it like that. All right. So this is you. Okay. Now, obviously, dad had to have a grandma and grandpa too. So we would have to work our way back. And we'll talk about this when we do pedigree charts in 2 weeks. So this is also grandma, abuela. Abuela? Yeah, I think so, right? And grandpa, abuelo, they got together and had a child. Okay? So it gets really complicated when you say things like, oh, the grandma. Which grandma? Dad's grandma? It gets all confusing. So we start using things like P generation, F1 generation, F2 generation. Okay? What is P generation? These are the parents. P for parents. So if I'm just looking at this, I have P generation and F1 generation. Okay? F1 is the offspring or the children from the P generation. The F2 generation is the offspring from the F1 generation because people keep having babies generation after generation after generation. Now, these can be used differently. If I'm talking about grandma, grandpa level, and the mom and dad level, and then you, then I'm going to say grandma, grandpa are the P generation, mom and dad are the F1 generation, and you are the F2 generation. But let's say I don't go back to grandma and grandpa. I forget about this. I just talk about you, mom, and dad. Well, now the P generation becomes the parents. So mom and dad would be the P generation, and you would be the F1 generation, and then your kids would be the F2 generation. So these can move depending on what you're talking about over here. In this particular instance, grandma and grandpa are the P, the F1 and the F2. So if you see these P generation, talk about who are the parents in this situation. Talking about F1, we're talking about these people's children. We're talking about F2, we're talking about these people's children. Okay, so that's the way it goes. If you want to know what the F stands for, it stands for filial. I want to say filial. I get screwed up that word. It's a Latin term referring to children. Okay. So you got the basics in here now. Let's jump into what you're going to see with some genetics problems. All right. So let's say that we want to cross mom and dad. All right. So let's go back to mom and dad. Mom, dad. I'm not doing grandma and grandpa this time. So they would be the P generation right here. All right, and let's say we're going to talk about dimples. Oh, dimples. Did you know that dimples are dominant? So we're going to give the letter D. Again, I could choose any letter I want, P, M, whatever. I just chose D for dimples. It makes it easy. So the capital D means you have dimples. The lowercase d, or the recessive DNA, is no dimples. Okay? And I'm going to tell you that mom is homozygous dominant. So think real quick. Mom is homozygous dominant. Homo means the same. Dominant means capital letters. Okay, so mom is capital D, capital D. I'm going to tell you dad is homozygous recessive. What does that mean? Same letters, but recessive. So now dad is lowercase d, lowercase d. So if I say, does mom have dimples? You go over here and you say, well, she's got two capitals. Capital means dimples. Yeah, mom has got dimples. Dad, does dad have dimples? Well, he's got two lowercase d's. Lowercase d means no dimples. So dad has no dimples. Okay. They have a child. So I usually draw with arrows like so, or just lines. And we don't know the child. So I put question mark here. Who is the child? Is the child going to have dimples or not? All right. So how do we figure this out? Well, you'd have to say which combinations could they be here? The capital D, lowercase d. Instead of sitting here trying to figure out all the combinations, there's a simple way to do this, which is called a Punnett Square. Why is it called a Punnett Square? Named after the guy who came up with it, I would bet. And when you see it, you're like, really? This guy gets to go down in history for this? Okay, so all he did, and you've seen these in math class, he made a square, and in the square, he put 4 boxes. Amazing. This guy is a genius. Wow. He gets to have his name in genetic books for the rest of time because he came up with a 4-box square. Fantastic. All right. And what you do is you take the genotype of mom and you put it here, and you take the genotype of dad and you put it here. Now, could you put dad on the side and mom on top? Sure, it doesn't matter. Just one parent on the left, one parent on top. So I'm going to do mom's DNA here, capital D, dad's DNA here, lowercase d. And so then I go, okay, it's just like in math class when you match them up. All right, capital D here goes across, capital D, cross and across. The little d goes down. So boom, 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 boom. So these are the 4 possibilities for their child. And so the way you read this is the first, you do the genotypes. You say, okay, the genotypes. Well, there's 4 boxes. All 4 boxes are the exact same thing. Capital D, lowercase d, capital lowercase, capital lowercase, capital lowercase. So I have 4 capital lowercase. Okay? And that is 100%. 100% chance that the child is going to be capital lowercase for this situation. So then you go, well, then is the kid going to have dimples? Well, if they have capital D, lowercase d, what will the child have? The child will have the capital D will dominate over the recessive, which dominant is dimples. So yes, all 4 children will have, all 4 possibilities for children will have dimples. So there is a 100% guarantee that this mom and dad will have a child with dimples. Doesn't matter if it's a boy or girl, this child will have dimples. Okay, but they're going to be a carrier for dimples because there's also a 100% guarantee that they'll have that lowercase letter. So they're carriers, if you want to think of it that way. That's it. That's how we figure it out. Oh, sorry. And these are called the phenotypes. You can't figure out the phenotypes till you know the genotypes. You can't figure out the possibilities unless you do a Punnett Square. Can't do the Punnett Square unless you know mom and dad's genotypes. Okay. Now, you don't always do a Punnett Square, but anytime that there's asking for a child, an unknown child or children, you got to run a Punnett Square. Doesn't always work that way. All right, let's do one more example of a genetics problem. Okay, let's make a line. All right, I'm going to give you another example. We've got mom and dad. Mom, dad. Now you don't have to write mom and dad every time. I do that because you're learning it right now, but over time you're gonna figure out. Now, what if I say, oh, mom is a carrier for dimples? Oh wait, I gotta define my letters. Always define your letters. Capitals means you will have dimples. Lowercase d means you will not have dimples. Okay, I say mom is a carrier for Dimples. What does that mean? You gotta go back to what we wrote over here. Carrier. Carrier means you're heterozygous. Okay, so mom is a carrier. That means she must be capital D, lowercase d. And I say dad is heterozygous for Dimples. What does that mean? Same thing, just said differently. He's also capital D, lowercase d. Okay, just on a side note, is mom gonna have Dimples? Yes, because mom has a capital D over the lowercase d. Does dad have Dimples? Yes, because capital D over the lowercase d. So both mom and dad have Dimples. Okay, so I say what possibilities for their children could they have? So anytime you get into question mark children, that's when you want to run a Punnett square. Okay, so let me make up my fancy square here. I'm going to take mom, put her right here. Take dad, put them right here. Do the combinations, capital D, lowercase. Okay, now this one you might want to say lowercase capital, but we always put the capital first, even if it came from a different person. It's just common practice. Lowercase, lowercase. Okay, got some different combinations this time. It's not going to be 100% like it was on the last problem. All right, so then you got to write out your genotypes. Well, I've got one capital, so I just go 1 DD. Usually put a little colon just to separate them. I've got 2 capital lowercase, so 2 capital lowercase, and then I've got 1 lowercase. Now, if you want to run percents, this is 1 out of how many boxes? 1 out of 4. 1 out of 4 is what percent? 25%. This one, 2 boxes out of 4. 2 out of 4. Oh my gosh, it's like math. 50%. 1 box out of 4 is 25%. Okay, those are the genotypes. Now, the phenotypes. So I say, all right, if you are capital D, let me go back up to my key. Capital D means you're gonna have Dimples. So if you both Dimples, you're gonna have Dimples. So we're gonna have 1 with Dimples. Okay. These 2 people, capital D, lowercase d. We got 1 Dimples and 1 no Dimples. Ah, but this is dominant, so it'll dominate over the little one. So yes, both of these people are gonna have Dimples. All right, this one's little d. Both of them are the same, so they're both going to be no Dimples. So look what happened here. Even though these 2 are different genotypes, they have the same phenotype. So we would then combine these 2 and say 3 of them are going to have Dimples, and 1 of them is no Dimples. And so you say percent, 3 out of 4 is 75%, and 1 out of 4 is still 25%. So now the question is, what is it we're trying to figure out? If these parents came to me as a doctor and said, what are the chances our child will have Dimples? I would look at the phenotype and say, you have a 75% chance of having a child with Dimples and 25% chance of no Dimples. But if they say, what is the chance that our child will be a carrier for Dimples? Carrier means heterozygous. So I look right here and I say, well, you got a 50% chance of that. So it depends on what the question is trying to figure out or what the parents might be asking in this situation. And so that's why you have to do the genotypes and the phenotypes. Even though the genotypes are different, the phenotypes came out the same. And that does happen a lot. So be very careful. This is why when you do genetics problems, I'm going to ask that you define your letters, draw a short little sketch, a picture of mom, dad, and children. If you need to run a Punnett square, you run the Punnett square. After you run the Punnett square, do your genotypes and phenotypes, okay? And then lay it all out. And then the last step is to go back and actually answer the question. So you gotta say, well, what is the question? You gotta go back and read it. Now, you might be saying, that's a lot of work for one question. Yes, that's why I'm only giving you 5 questions like this. Okay, 5, that's not very difficult. And I'm gonna go over 2 of them in the other video. So Take your time, work your way through it, make sure that you understand how to identify your letters. Need to know homozygous, heterozygous, dominant, recessive, all those good things, genotype, phenotype. Okay, so if you got to watch this video again and go over that stuff, or just go to those parts, that's why we're doing the concept map first, is so I can get you to understand all these verbs and vocab and all that stuff. And then we'll start in on some basic problems, and then we'll do problems just like this. This is what I would consider an advanced problem. All right, and that is how you do genetics with Mr. Charlton. Okay, hopefully this breaks it down for you. Sorry, it's a little grainy with the notes. My light went out. It's kind of dark in here. But if you ever get stuck on any of the problems, or you're like, wait, what's homozygous dominant again? Like you're not getting it, please reach out for help. Come to office hours, Wednesday, Thursday, 2 o'clock, ask for help. Text message me, send me a Jupyter message. Genetics is like one of those things where if you get it, it's like, got it. Not a problem at all. And you'll just be looking, I could bust through these and no problem at all. And then the people who aren't clicking yet are going to be like, I don't get it. What are these letters? What are these numbers? I don't know. Like, it just seems like goobly gobbly. And then all of a sudden you get it and it clicks and you go, oh, that's not that hard at all. And so if you're getting it right now, sweet. If you're like not understanding it, then try some problems or reach out for help or watch this video again. You can go on YouTube. There are tons of other videos on there too that may explain it differently than I do. Still the same basic concepts. So, you know, watch those videos, but be careful because there's a lot of different kinds of traits, which we'll learn about next week. So make sure you're watching the right kind of video. But again, reach out for help. You got to get help on these things. All right, that's basic genetics. And then the next video, we'll go over how to do the problems just like we did and go over to the practice problems. All right, good luck with these problems, everybody.